So there's a lot of people out there that say that they're being gang stalked, but many of them don't even know what it's really like to be harassed. Today is July 4th, 2023. It is 9 a.m. For years, I've been using the term spiritual warfare to describe what is happening to many people that think that they're being followed in their immediate environment by the people around them. I believe that that is the result of spiritual warfare and a different type of targeting that comes from the unseen realms. And that is what I have been discussing for years. And as a result of that, I have come under spiritual attack. And things have been done to me, things have been done to my name to encourage others to harm me in some way or judge me in some way. The difference between that and people talking about gang stalking is that when I talk about the things that have happened to me, no one really cares. But when someone says they're being gang stalked and that they're a TI, the algorithm will put them in touch with other people that say that they are experiencing the same thing, although it may not be the same thing. But there is this groupthink taking place with those that self-describe themselves as being gang stalked. And so I don't describe the harassment that I have been through, the stalking that I have been through, necessarily as gang stalking. And certainly not publicly, because talking about it publicly and using those buzzwords only draws in more negative energy, more anxiety, more paranoia, and paranoid people that ultimately are not very helpful or empathetic. I've had people enter into my life in the past that have tried to convince me that I'm a targeted individual, that I am being gang stalked, and I tried to explain to them that yes, I acknowledge that my spirit or soul may be stalked by something. What they happen to be describing is not something that I believe is true. There isn't a team of people receiving paychecks from the secret government interfering with my life or in the lives of others, but people are experiencing anomalies and in some cases electronic harassment or interference with electronics, and there could be many explanations for that depending on what your belief system is spiritually. But evil spirits, I do believe, can affect our technologies to a certain degree. So a lot of people that have been led to believe that they are being gang stalked, in some cases they stalk others or harass others, especially if they believe that the others are harassing them or are denying them their version of reality or disagreeing with them. They can easily be seen as a perp. And so there's a lot of negative energies in these gang stalking communities for obvious reasons. These aren't very spiritual people. And so it is not recommended to make videos about gang stalking for these people because they often react in an angry way when someone tries to tell them that they're under spiritual attack or archonic attack. Some of them are at the level, though, of realizing that it's an entity, but they're far from spiritual. They may instead unconsciously seek someone else to give their entity to through a text message or through Facebook chat or something like that, to where the energies are already unstable. That's why it's not smart for people to be immersed with technologies when they feel that they're being attacked. The first thing that they need to do is attempt to protect themselves spiritually, which most people don't do. And they should seek to detach from technology, especially cell phones, especially social media, or in some cases, the entire internet. Now, that doesn't necessarily make the spiritual attacks go away, but it does help minimize some of the artificial interference. So when people choose to use the terminology targeted individual or gang stalking, they typically take on certain psychologies and other levels of disinformation. They may also be promoting Nazism and or the flat earth. You will rarely see people talking about racism, white supremacy, and gang stalking in the same sentence. Why not? Because racism can lead to stalking, which can lead to the harm of others and motivate people towards the harm of others. So the algorithm doesn't promote that. The other thing is When you look up targeted individuals and when you look up gangstalking, there's a certain word that will be auto-suggested. And I picked up on this even before I noticed the auto-suggest, and that is chosen ones. You got all these people out there on the internet telling people they're being gangstalked because they're chosen ones. When the reality is, some people are being attacked by entities because they're open to it, and they need to be evolving spiritually. It's not a great sign. Sure, they could be attacked because they're gifts. I identify with that to a certain degree. But to say that everybody that's dealing with this harassment is a chosen one is an absolute lie. Some people have drug issues, sex addiction issues, other issues that draws in these negative entities. Also issues with racism and hatred can draw in these negative entities to want to fuck with someone and take them over completely. Where are they talking about that? And if someone was to talk about those things, would the algorithm even allow them to be seen? Or would they be filtered out? Because this algorithm, this AI, which I think in and of itself is an evil entity, which may be reading our thoughts somehow, some way, is not on our side. Will promote content that will lead us into insanity and confusion. And so this whole identifying people that are being gang-stalked with the chosen ones sounds a lot like the New Age distorted teachings of 5D and the Ascension movement. So when I know that someone's talking about 5D and Ascension, I know I got to go in the other direction. That they're not truly on the spiritual path of taking accountability for our actions. And they're certainly not calling out these wars that have killed millions in the Middle East and other places. You know, you don't see that typically from people that say they're being gang-stalked. And so I don't identify someone to be truly on the spiritual path often if they're using gang-stalking terminology. And I choose to not use it myself. Instead, I've talked about spiritual warfare and the need to learn psychic self-defense. While not everybody's psychic, everybody does have the ability to tap into information, to absorb it from the unseen realms, whether they're conscious of it or unconscious of it. And so as a result, a lot of people are picking up on unhealthy things in the collective. They are not shielding themselves against the harmful influences of this society. Thus, there are many people that have been driven mentally insane. It has to do with their environment. And we're not being taught this by our parents about how unhealthy the world is and how it can really screw a person up if they're not protected in mind, body, and spirit. So yeah, there is this whole, you could even call it an industry, because there may be some people making money off of it at a level. There certainly is a potential to make money off of popular topics when you're getting lots of hits, because then you can suggest a product or suggest another area, a point of purchase. But it does seem like a whole industry, the whole gang stalking conversation. Now, there are people out there in the mental health field that are aware that there are people out there that they would call mentally ill or unstable that believe that they are being gang stalked. And when they hear someone else, however, talk about spiritual warfare or feeling like they're being under spiritual attack from evil entities in this world, they may view that person as very unstable because of who it reminds them of. So, for example, I have a psychiatrist, and I've talked about the feeling of being under spiritual warfare and being affected by the solar flares. She may hear things like that and think that I'm incredibly unstable because, of course, everybody's heard something about somebody who went crazy somewhere, who thought aliens were talking to him or that he was hearing voices. I mean, there are many stories of this. Of course, there are many stories of people like this that took antipsychotic and other harmful medications, and that's why they snapped in some cases. But many people will fail to distinguish between someone that is actually being tormented spiritually versus someone that may have a mental illness or maybe also tormented spiritually, but maybe in a different way. One that may be less stable than the other. And so some people have a greater awareness as to what's going on while they're being tormented by these spirits. And they're able to protect themselves at a certain level. They're able to meditate. They're able to be in control of their own thoughts. They're not having hallucinations. Whereas other people that may be tormented by these spirits may be hearing voices, maybe hearing delusions, maybe feeling that they have to respond violently, right? They may be thinking that all the people around them, for example, are gang stalking them, and that anyone gang stalking them, well, then it's open season. See, then you have a lot of unstable people out there that talk like, they're ready to retaliate against the people that they say and accuse of gang stalking them. And of course, in many of these videos that are promoted by the YouTube algorithm, you're not actually seeing evidence of someone harassing someone else. You're seeing like an 18-second video, poorly shot, pulled out of someone's camera pulled out of someone's pocket, rather, in a frantic panic, filming someone walking by them at the convenience store or at the gas station. No, that is not sign of harassment. Yet there'll be thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this phenomena, because it is somewhat of a phenomenon, that will be agreeing with that person. Are all those people government agents? Are all those people nuts? Are all those people being manipulated by entities? Is a little bit of all these things or a few of these things? We don't really know. But we can say that there could be another example where someone is defamed online, where someone literally goes out of their way to destroy someone else's name and reputation, to drive them into isolation or bankruptcy or poverty or homelessness. This is what was done to me. And you won't see in that case people talking about, well, that person was harassed out in the open, slandered out in the open, defamed out in the open, and it affected their platform. It affected their lives. It affected their home life. There won't be that light bulb go off above their head regarding someone else's real life harassment. And, it could fit the description, you would think, for some, of gang stalking, if it involves multiple people messing with the same person. There were signs a few years ago that there were multiple people messing with me at the same time on the internet. Did people come to my aid? Did people defend me when it was happening out in the open? No. Why is that? It's like that is part of the spiritual warfare itself. That there is a denial that it's taking place, that the harassment's taking place, that the racism is taking place. And that makes it worse, to go through the experience and then to talk about the experience and be ignored, or to be called a liar, or worse yet, to be viewed as mentally ill. In my case, there were actual cases of harassment and stalking that led to me moving from one state to another and no longer putting information online. And that affected my very fucking soul. That wounded my soul. That affected me spiritually, because I was no longer shining my light. I decided to shut down the light, shut down shop, close up shop, and basically, like vandals, busting up a business, driving it into bankruptcy, or destroying a business by vandalizing it in some way so it doesn't ever reopen again, or they lose their spirit, which is needed to reopen again after such a traumatic thing takes place. So like, my spirit did not rebound because I did not have the support around me and the friends around me at the time in which these things happened. I was in isolation. I did not have the people to talk to. I did not have qualified therapists or psychiatrists to talk to that understood what was happening, that stood behind me and my message, that saw value in my message. No, I didn't have people to talk to that saw value in my message, that saw me powerful as a spirit and saw what I was working for. There may be some people in the audience that saw me as a powerful spirit, but they weren't certainly there for me as a friend. We certainly weren't on a talking basis, one-on-one, behind the scenes of YouTube. No, they were just maybe there in the audience, maybe listening here and there. There was one person that I talked to in 2019 and a little bit in early 2020. He went by the name of Giovanni. And here he is 3 years later on his BitChute channel saying how he hopes the people that got the vax, how they're looking forward to the day that they die. And another person is putting out racist stuff in the comment section, saying they have no problems with Arabs as long as they stay in Arabia, no problems with Africans as long as they stay in Africa, and another paragraph of bullshit, white supremacist nonsense. And there's Giovanni in the comments saying 2 words, I agree. There I am, right again about the spiritual warfare taking place over these people, over many white Americans, whether they call themselves Jewish or not. I put out a video in 2014, took it down because I hit too close to the truth, and it have many white Americans become targeted individuals. And that didn't have to do with, making a video, creating content, making them out to be victims. Ooh, victims of brown people. Ooh. But targeted in a specific way. Their psychology being targeted. So that they, as white Americans, became more callous to various people of color, especially Middle Eastern people. And so here I am talking about this in 2014, 2015. And there was a massive amount of fake news and propaganda that was geared towards the white mind, to be afraid of foreigners and immigrants. This is before the rise of Donald Trump. And see, you would think that conspiracy theorists would be concerned about attempts to play with their own mind and attempts to play with their own emotions. Nothing wrong with wanting to be safe and not wanting to be hurt by criminal elements, but propaganda has been used to turn us against everybody that looks different than the majority. And I've lived in many places where whites are the majority. Yeah, there's a lot more I can talk about that with regards to the mind control going on to direct America into a far right direction. That would take longer to get into. We're primarily focused on the discussion of gangstalking. And how a lot of people, bringing it back down to this though, that talk about gangstalking are apathetic to others that have been victimized, or in specific terms, have experienced white supremacy or racism. And that would include also black supremacy, racism from blacks, right? There isn't just black on white violence taking place that we need to be aware of, because it is taking place and it is serious. There's also a lot of crime happening to other minorities other than black. The blacks could see them in some cases as white or the preferred minority, or they may be angry with them, just as many whites are angry with certain immigrants, thinking that they are here taking from them, taking away from their quality of life, when in many cases that is bullshit. Or there may be someone that they think is foreign, but they're not foreign. They're a fucking American. For example, I'm a fucking American, but I cannot change my father's DNA and how that influenced my appearance, despite the fact that my mother is white and that I was raised in a white family and that I only speak English and that I'm only of the American culture. Despite all that shit, doesn't change the fact that I'm gonna look different because of my father. And that in and of itself has attracted harassment, has attracted racism, and has influenced people to slander me. And to slander me with the hopes that it will influence others to treat me poorly in some way, shape, or form, or to not befriend me. Whereas many of these people out there that claim that they are being gang-stalked, right? They can type in their own names on Google or into the internet and not find anything out there that's slandering them. Nothing. It's like they don't even know what it's like to truly be targeted. And so I'm not one typically to side with the medical health community and just label certain things schizophrenia. I don't typically want to do that because I think that a lot of people are being messed with on some level. But what is actually taking place with them? Is it as they are saying that there's a team of people on their block and in their family that are getting paychecks from the government to spy on them, to bother them, or affect them in a adverse way? Is that absolutely what is taking place? Or have they experienced the phenomena of experiencing a lot of bad luck? For example, getting on the road and dealing with road rage, or dealing with someone screaming at you, or some other incident where someone tries to bait you into a conflict. Those could be the results of spiritual attacks, where someone else's darkness or the entities around someone else is looking to come after a different person that they who's like that they don't like. That can happen in some cases, but it's not happening in all cases. In many, many cases, someone has an entity attachment because of something going on within their own behavior. Not everybody out there is a chosen one superhero ascending to the fifth dimension. Not when they're sitting around on their cell phone on social media doing absolutely nothing but sharing link after link after link about how they're being targeted. If they aren't actually doing something to stand up for other people that are being targeted, like the people in the Middle East are being wiped out by modern weapons of war, right? Then why would they be targeted? Just look at it from a rational perspective. Why would there be such a focus on just these random people in society? How are they chosen if they're not even doing something to enlighten the world? How are they chosen? Chosen by what also? They're not necessarily saying chosen by God. That's another thing. They're chosen. But chosen by who or what are they chosen? Someone truly on the spiritual path is not advised in any way, shape, or form to get advice from people that believe that they are targeted individuals or that they are being gang stalked. Because it is evident in the exchanges that I've had with people and from the content being shared with people that they are in a very limited understanding of what is taking place with them. They're physically talking man-made technologies and human beings that are being employed by the shadow government or some agency. Of course, no one ever exposes the agenda or blows the whistle, despite everybody being in on it. Their official story of what is taking place makes no sense and will only encourage genuine mental health symptoms or psychosis. But in many cases, we may be dealing with an entity that wants these people to think that that is taking place, that their family is in on it, that their neighbors are in on it. Because that can drive them towards retaliating, especially if they actually are receiving voices in their head saying, you need to do something about this person. There's plenty of stories about this in the news that are specific. And I remember actually reading one story about one incident on my channel, and then something very bad happened to me after that. Like I was reporting on demonic, archonic possession, alien possession of a friggin' human being. And then something happened in my own life where I'm experiencing my own interference from another human being who I thought I could trust, who in fact I could not trust. So I have literally been retaliated against by exposing alien possession on this planet. And so there could be a story about a person in the news who goes after someone like a church pastor or a spiritual leader who they became convinced was a shape-shifting reptilian. And so there may be people out there that are shape-shifting, but we certainly don't want to go after them with firearms like something out of They Live with Roddy Piper or some other sci-fi movie. And I tend to think that the shape-shifting thing isn't really needed. They can control people through other ways. That many souls are corrupted and controlled remotely, spiritually, in some way, shape, or form by these unseen forces. And so an act of violence isn't going to fix it or stop any of them or any of the possessions. is only going to do one thing, and that's going to make people that talk about possessions look crazy or look threatening to people in the mental health community and the world at large. So yeah, I saw a story like that where a guy was convinced that his pastor became a shape-shifting reptilian and he took him out. And so, like, you can't just go out there in the world and talk about alien possession or iconic possession and be expected to be taken seriously. And even though some of us may have good intentions out there, we want to help people rise above these conditions. We want to help people clear out the noise in their heads and know when their own thoughts are their own, how to protect themselves from psychic intrusion. We may want to help those people, but we can end up attacked ourselves for doing so. Demonized ourselves, slandered ourselves because of the good work that we were doing. And it happened to me. And so I didn't create content for multiple years. And now in 2023, I'm recording content at the moment, and I'm trying to determine what is the right time to upload it. And I don't know when that will be, but I know that it will be at some point. And that I'm motivated to help people help themselves. Because you're going to have to help yourself. You're not going to get it from people claiming that they're being gang stalked. And you're not going to get help necessarily from the mental health community. Because they're not going to realize those cases when there is genuine spiritual attack taking place. They're automatically going to recommend medications after diagnosing someone with schizophrenia or schizoid affective disorder or something else. And these medications that they prescribe, right, they may cause psychosis and psychic attack to a certain degree and cut off your connection with the divine. And you need your connection with the divine to deal with spiritual attacks, because in some cases only God can help. And how can God help if you cannot clearly understand what God is saying? And I don't mean hearing God. I've never heard God, but to be able to perceive or to download bits of information, to be able to get a spiritual download, in other words, to be able to have an epiphany, to have that idea of what you need to do for yourself when you're in deep prayer and contemplation. And I don't get those experiences on pharmaceutical drugs, quite the opposite. I went like a full couple years without journaling or recording anything while I had my little experimentation with pharmaceutical drugs, with an antipsychotic and antidepressant. Did absolutely nothing helpful for me. Sure, it sedated me, but it turned me somewhat into a zombie to where I was too emotionally numb and cut off from my own spirituality. And in that case, well, you're not shining your own light, you're not speaking your own truth, right? In a way, the entities already have you at that point because they've neutralized you as a fucking threat. They've stopped you from sharing your light. They've stopped one from speaking their truth, and they've got them right where they want them. So it's not necessarily a sign of greater mental health to be sedated and not speaking one's truth, and to be emotionally numb, and to be physically inactive. So one has to find the ability to help themselves, to learn psychic self-defense, to learn a form of meditation, to have a spiritual practice. Now, while I don't use the term gang stalking when referring to my own experiences with stalking, with harassment, with assault, um, my experiences are still very relevant nonetheless. Because I've dealt with harassment most of my life, even before I started speaking out, even before I created my own platform. I remember being assaulted as a child for no reason from a number of different ethnicities. And I grew up being the only person of my own mixed race ethnicity in the countryside, going to a small school then. And yeah, I remember being punched in the head. And I remember at the time, my mother having a callous attitude with regards to this and saying even that it was my karma. I remember her saying this at least in one occasion, and it may have been her attitude throughout the entirety of these situations, but she was generally of the attitude that I was to blame. And this felt like a spiritual attack. In general, the upbringing from my parents felt like a spiritual attack. My parents having their way with me before the world did, but they both did not teach me how to deal with adversity and harassment. Neither of them did anything to help me build up my own confidence, as the world was kicking my own ass in some cases, literally. They were figuratively, or in other ways, energetically kicking my own ass or my own self-image. So when it comes to early life experiences regarding bullying, my parents were not there for me. My father was not a fan of me learning to physically defend myself. It infuriated him, even though he had his own experiences with racism and being assaulted. So how sane is this guy? He's been assaulted in his own friggin' life. He suffered from racism in his own fucking life. But he's not gonna have concern for his own child? So yeah, neither of my parents set me up very well for the shit that I would deal with later. So I dealt with loneliness and ended up with a bad friend, the G-Man, who taught me how to shoot dope. And if it wasn't for public school, I wouldn't have been meeting G-Man to begin with, would I? But there I was, lonely after moving out of my dad's house after having to live with him for a few years and his bullshit. Free of him, free of my mother, and there I am, an adult, the age of 18, then turning to 19, ready to experience new things and new realities. And here I am with the G-Man of all friends, who seemed to be there for me in my life to get me into trouble. Not there for me when I needed him later on in life. Only there for me when he was there to get me in trouble, when I was vulnerable. Vulnerable to suggestion, to being influenced by another. And there are a number of different ways he tried to get me into some level of criminality. I'm glad in those other ways he tried to influence me that I did not bite, that I did not take the bait, that I did not fall for it, that I did not go with the suggestion that I was given. So through my parents and through this guy and through other experiences, the world has had its way with me and has been working against my light. And I want to work to the point of sharing my story. Because while a lot of people talk about gang stalking, they're not really being gang stalked. Their name hasn't been slandered. They haven't really had to move. They haven't really been denied employment. It is happening in many cases in their head because some people, A, may consider it mental illness, or B, someone may also consider it a spiritual attack. They are being led to believe these things so that they appear crazy and unstable to those around them, when in reality there may be something messing with them, with their mind, with their thoughts. And in some cases, there can be interference where people are directed into someone's life to cause some sort of interference. It can be indirect and direct. Direct could be just like a direct experience, like an assault or something else, being slandered. Then there's indirect, where it comes in the form, and where it can often start as indirect, where people start off as your friends or your allies, and later they become your enemy. And they slander you or defame you after they got a chance to get close to you. And you may have perceived them to be friends. I know because I made these mistakes. There are times in which people that hurt me started off as associates or friends, where I shouldn't have talked to them to begin with. This wasn't just the case of the G-Man, but other people later on in life. And so, there's a lot of complaints about loneliness. There's a loneliness epidemic. Yes. But just because one is lonely doesn't mean that one should just hang out with everybody out there that's lonely Or in the other case, that people that think that they're being TI'd or gang stalked should hang out with other people that are being TI'd or gang stalked or believe that they are. The other thing that I've come to realize is if you have people that have certain anxiety issues, paranoia issues, it's not going to help someone else if you put those people in the same room or if those people are talking to each other or texting each other. That's why you don't have also many positive gatherings of conspiracy theorists, even though I am labeled to be one and certain ideas are certainly conspiratorial. I'm not a mainstream conspiracy theorist. I'm certainly not a Trump-tard or a racist. And unfortunately, many people are today that look at conspiracy theories because they're not looking at the light. They're being influenced by the darkness, falsely believing that they are awake. That's the modern day truther movement. And so people that don't associate with Trump-tardism and white supremacy or being blind to white supremacy, they don't belong in a circle of mainstream truthers because so many of them have been corrupted. So this corruption that I'm talking about, this algorithmic corruption online especially, is happening on so many different levels. So if you want to look at information regarding conspiracies, you're going to be led into the mainstream conspiracy stuff, the stuff that they are promoting, the stuff that they want you looking at, the stuff that is not a threat to them, the stuff that's safe, because they know a lot of people have concerns about a great many things because it's obvious how corrupt things are. It's obvious there's an agenda. So it's obvious there's going to be people out there looking for truth wherever they can find it. But people are not discerning. They don't know the truth between, they don't know how to sense on Facebook or YouTube if they're being told the truth or if they're being told a lie. Whereas some of us, we can feel that within ourselves, whether there's truth to something or a lie. That also includes situations where we're coming across someone's story and we can sense, maybe in some cases, what's actually going on with them, whether they're actually in psychosis or not, or whether there's something legitimately happening to them. And with regards to that, people can be led into psychosis intentionally by mischievous spirits that are not in human form. And there may even be some ways in which these spirits can manipulate algorithms or things online. It's possible. I'm not going to say that it's absolutely definite or that I have absolute proof. I would say that I suspect that there may be some manipulation of the algorithm on an entity level or a non-human level. And yeah, that can lead some people to be in a very scared space. Not everybody is ready for this information. So some people maybe shouldn't even bother with it if they're not grounded enough. But people shouldn't be allergic to the truth as to the real spiritual warfare taking place right now. The next thing that I'll mention regarding my own experiences is that I have experienced personally defamation of my own name. And I believe that happened because the person doing it was basically taken over by an evil spirit, an entity. Otherwise, why would he do that? How did he gain from that? He gained nothing from it. But when it comes to the dark realms, those entities that I'm exposing, see, a number of different things happened with my information, the algorithm. And things that I talked about regarding the unseen realms just did not come up on the internet. Whereas other things did. Whereas the slander did. And so that's pretty heavy to sit with, what I've been sitting with all these years. It is somewhat of a sickening, overwhelming feeling to know that you're being interfered with on a level greater than what other people are experiencing, and to not have a support group or a sympathetic group or people to talk to, therapist or otherwise, people that say, yeah, man, I understand what you've been through, what you're going through, what's happened to you. I have empathy for you. I'm concerned for you. I don't have that. Instead, I see these people saying that they're target individuals, they're being gang stalked, and yet there's nothing to suggest that anybody is fucking with them at all. And yet there's an entire community of people that will be like, yeah, man, absolutely. And the person is messing with me down the street as well. And their little dog Toto too. And so while they're suggesting these absurd things, these things that are not based in logic and reason, suggesting their entire neighborhood is in on it, and all these other things, they're co-signing that nonsense. Meanwhile, the stuff that I have been through, like I said, it's not understood. You would think that someone of a certain level of intelligence can look at what's happened to someone's public profile when they've been slandered and defamed in some way, and how that can lead to great difficulties for that person of a wide variety. Someone of a basic level of intelligence should be able to come up with an understanding of what those difficulties might be after being slandered, how it might affect their sense of feeling safe, or life at home, or attempts to get a fucking job in a world in which we need money to survive. You would think that some people would have a certain level of empathy and compassion. You would think that some people would realize, oh, people of a certain ethnicity or background are typically feared as terrorists and criminals. And here is our friend here being slandered as just that. You would think that some people would have compassion for that person, empathy for that person. And I received none of that. So how could I go back and assume that those people are more awake today because a few years have passed and because things have gotten more in our face and worse? Why should I assume that they are more awake because things have gotten worse? Because things have gotten worse, they've gotten worse. They've been getting worse for years, especially since 2012. But what have we seen since the 2010s, 11s, in that period? We've seen computer processing take off, along with social media addiction. So just technology in general has taken off. Quantum processing, all these different terms, the race towards singularity, and so mental illness has taken off. Yeah, they don't talk about that in these gang stalking videos because they're not really helping people in these gang stalking videos. They don't talk about how the modern day and age that we live in with all this technology is essentially unhealthy for us. And the cell phones, the cell phone towers, the other technologies, they are going to simulate in many cases, in many people that are vulnerable. And there's many ways in which someone can become vulnerable and why. But in certain environments, people are going to be feeling like there may be voices in their head or that they're being messed with by entities. It could even be possible that some of these environments, these technological grids, these areas in which there's a lot of electricity, these could even be conduits where there's entities coming in and out of these places. So I'm not discounting the idea that people can be stalked by something and that they can deal with this maybe throughout their own life, throughout the various stages of their life. As I have just said to you, that it has happened in multiple stages of my life. I've been assaulted as a child. I've had people come into my life early on that got me into trouble with the fucking law and got me into drugs. I had other people come in later on that slandered my name or in other ways try to get me in trouble with the legal system. And for the internet to allow that to take place. I absolutely feel targeted by evil forces in this realm. But that is because it's coming from a place that's beyond human. And a lot of people cannot realize that they are dealing with something advanced. They don't realize that whatever is haunting them wants them to believe that it's just their neighbors in on this, when in reality they're doing something else. Going back to something else I experienced, there was a young black thug in the neighborhood that bent back a sign on our property several months later, as we saw on the cameras. And then a few months later, I went to put the trash outside, and he's down the street playing basketball at the neighbor's house. And he literally follows me as I turn around and go back to the front door to go back inside after taking the trash out. He's seen on surveillance camera following me or walking around where I was. I didn't notice he was behind me. But I'm thinking to myself as I watch this on surveillance footage, what would possess him to do that? Why would you walk towards someone and their property unless you're thinking about starting a fucking fight with them or you're stalking them? And so I do feel that this person was stalking me, at least for the moment, and was thinking about messing with me or intimidating me, because there's no rational explanation for him following me. So I definitely can understand that some people can think that they are being gang stalked because they are dealing with someone following them or treating them in a negative way or starting something with them. But they don't understand in many cases that these people are not official employees of some shadow government. They are human beings that have been hijacked in some cases. In some cases, that's not what's taking place. It just may be their own paranoia and some entity making them think that someone's messing with them. That's happening too. But in other cases, absolutely, there is an entity hijacking taking place. And I do not know how to deal with something like this other than meditation, prayer, to try to purify oneself, to serve the light so there is that protection. Certain rules of thumb. But I do not have the absolute answer. Because in this realm, the more spiritual you are, in some cases, the more types of interference you may experience. And there may be some times in which there's more interference taking place than others. It could be because there's a full moon taking place, or there's the influence of an eclipse nearby, either from a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. We have been in eclipse season at the moment of recording, and we're going into another eclipse later on in the year, and also in April of 2024. So I think that a lot of people should be working on themselves spiritually, working on grounding themselves, becoming spiritually stronger, developing that aura of protection around themselves as we go into these changes, and to attempt to the best of their ability, purify themselves to serve the true light. And there's a lot of people out there that are not doing that. See, people should be suspicious when the algorithm is trying to suggest that people coming under these types of things or perceiving that they're being gang stalked are automatically chosen ones, or that they're ascending to the 5D. There's a lot of people out there that are dealing with any of the attachments because of their behaviors, because of the low voltage of their soul, because their souls are becoming possessed collectively. There's a collective possession taking place of a lot of people on this planet that are of a low voltage soul-wise, because they're not trying to increase their soul voltage. They're not trying to become a better person. So they're being taken over, and many of them are falsely being told that they are ascending when they're actually going mad. They're being told that they are the chosen ones, when in fact they are low voltage souls that don't know the first thing about standing up for the innocent. It is not the first thing on their mind. What is on their mind is themselves and what's happening on their cell phone. The cell phone that they ought to be getting away from their cell phone, getting away from technology, getting away from the videos that YouTube was auto-suggesting to them. And they should be immersing themselves in nature, in spiritual teachings, in creating information that can help others. Not just sitting there incessantly talking about gang stalking and targeted individuals. So yes, the experiences that I have discussed in brief have led me to suspect that I am dealing with a genuine form of spiritual warfare. But I cannot talk about what has happened to me on a large scale with today's population, because they do not seem to have an understanding. They're not able to emphasize or have empathy for my experiences. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . It's possible that elements of my story can um, enlighten others in some circumstances in the future, but I'm not here assuming that it's going to be a lot. But a lot may not be necessary. I believe that we should work to help as many people as possible by sharing our experiences and what worked for us, even if we're only able to reach a few people. Maybe that's all that's important.